Thank you for being here. We're so delighted to have Leila from France right here in our midst. I thank her right now and in advance for the wonderful dialogue that she had with our students at 4, and for this she is so warm that by sitting here, it's like being in her living room. And be prepared, because she already told me that she was going to ask you questions. So, just so you know. On the scene, there will be Professor Rockland, who will be the moderator. There will be a couple students going for questions with mics. And it will be my pleasure to introduce to you our delegate of the consulate, who was wonderful in helping organize this and making come to fruition. And I just want to say a little bit of something about Toby, who gave you the wonderful cocktail and who did the whole setup. So I will go without any more ado to the main course, or the pre-main course. It's with great pleasure that I present to you this afternoon Olivier Ngo, the Higher Education and French Language Attaché of the Consulat Général de France in Los Angeles. Olivier has been exceptional in his outreach to us and his support of French culture at the Claremont colleges. By bringing to us today such a remarkable intellectual and creative artist as Leila Slimani, he is contributing to create a multi-continental dialogue on issues of class, race, gender, and culture. Through this very special event today, which the consulate has sponsored, Olivier's tireless dedication is contributing to build a global community. Please welcome him warmly.
Merci France, tu m'as mis un peu la pression là. Bonjour à toutes et à tous, et merci de votre présence. Est-ce que tout le monde me comprend? Bon, maybe I'll switch to English. Yeah, I'll try in English, okay? Well, that's true. The magic with my accent, even I speak in English, but it still sounds like French, so it's okay. Huh? So it's of course my great pleasure to be among you today, and an immense honor to introduce Leila Slimani to you. I won't be too long because obviously you came to hear her and not me, but I just wanted to give you a few words about Leila's background. So although you said a few minutes ago that it doesn't define your identity, of course, Leila, but you were still born in Morocco, in Rabat more precisely, a beautiful capital of Morocco. And so your family background is Moroccan, of course, but also French and Algerian on your mother's side, I believe. So you grew up in a French-speaking environment, not only at school, because you were a student of the very well-known Lycée Descartes in Rabat, but also at home. And also, by the way, you say often that your parents gave you this love of books, of literature, and also of freedom. I think you graduated from high school in 1999, and then you decided to go to France, where you studied in 2 very prestigious institutions, namely Sciences Po and ESTP Europe, if I'm not mistaken. All right. So, and then you started your career as a journalist in a magazine or a journal called Jeune Afrique, and you became a reporter. You traveled a lot, you met with a lot of people, you discovered a lot of cultures. And despite this very exciting life, you decided to quit your job in 2012 to devote yourself to writing. And if I may, I would comment that this decision was an excellent one back then. In 2014, Leila published her first novel called Dans le Jardin de l'Ogre. I think it's in the process, you told me, of being translated into English. I don't know, next year maybe it will come out in the US. And you received La Mamounia Prize, which is a very prestigious literary prize in Morocco, and also you attracted a lot of attention and good critics in France. In 2016, you published your second novel, Chanson douce. The English, or rather the US version title, is The Perfect Nanny, because I think in the UK it's Lullaby, right? So, and you were awarded for this novel the most prestigious French literary prize that you all know is called the Prix Goncourt. And in fact, your novel became the most read novel in France in 2017, with over 600,000 copies sold only in France. Since then, it's been translated into, I think, 40 languages, you told me earlier, and maybe more to come. And let's not forget also that Leila wrote several essays, such as the very well-received Sexe et mensonges, La vie sexuelle au Maroc. I'm not sure how to translate that, maybe Sex and Lies, Sexual Life in Morocco. And also the related Parole d'honneur, which is a great graphic novel related to the book I just mentioned. And also Simone Veil, Mon Héroïne. All these books were published in 2017. And 2017 was definitely a very busy year for you. Because Emmanuel Macron, our president, also made you his personal representative or ambassador for Francophone affairs, what we call in France la Francophonie. So Scripps College, thank you very much for having us, and Claremont colleges in general, thank you for having us today. Leila, thank you very much for being here today. It's really a great honor. And if you don't mind, I will now leave you the floor, and maybe would you please start by telling us what brought you to writing, and also maybe what makes you choose the topics that you decide to address in your books. Merci à tous.
Thank you very much for this introduction, this very nice introduction. And I also had a child in 2017, I must say. Am I obsessed with sex? That's the question I've been asked many times by journalists. Why do you write about sex? Usually journalists don't seem surprised when a novelist decides to write about love, about war, about families. But it seems to me that sexuality, or more generally the body, is probably one of the most interesting topics for a novelist. That animal part of us fascinates me. It's everything that has to do with drives, with things that we can't stop ourselves from doing, with all the spaces where we are unable to reason with ourselves. It's our dark side. Our body is what makes us alive and what makes us die. We see each other through our bodies. We suffer, we are vulnerable, we are fragile because we have a body, because we are not only souls, but also blood and flesh. And I think that being a woman and having a body, the body of a woman, and walk in the public domain is not something insignificant, especially when you live in a country like Morocco, like I did. In 2014, as you said, I published my first novel, Dans le Jardin de l'Ogre, in the Ogre's Garden, which tells the story of Adèle. She's a 30-year-old journalist, married, mother to a child, and she's a sex addict. She lives a dual life of which nobody knows. All her existence is based on a lie. Her relationship to sexuality is damaging, dark, and violent. I think that there are people who give themselves over to sexuality. There are people who lose themselves in it. For me, sex is something painful, very melancholic, because one sees oneself. And I like to describe it and to explore it in my novels. I like to write ravishingly of female body, without glamour, without sentimentalism, that are very often linked to the description of women in movies or in novels. I like, for instance, to describe the transformation of a woman's body after giving birth. That's what I did in my second novel, Chanson douce. In this novel, I also tried to explore the relationship we have with the children's body. Children are dependent, vulnerable, especially little babies. They can't live if you don't feed them, if you don't take care of them. And this dependency fascinates me and has very, very complex implications. A few months after the release of my first novel, Dans le Jardin de l'Ogre, I went to Morocco to promote my book. And following one of the lectures, a woman came and sat right next to me. I was having a coffee in a bar. She told me she liked my novel. She had very good taste. That she liked the main character. And then she started to tell me about her own life. She told me especially about her mother. And she said that her mother kept repeating, "Don't forget." I asked her what did she mean when she said, "Don't forget." And she said, "Don't forget to stay a virgin." This woman has never been able to let go or to take pleasure. I was moved by her story. And at this very moment, I felt the urgent need to listen to more Moroccan women's voice and stories. I wanted to confront them and have them speak out about their body, their sexuality, and their perception of the law in Morocco. I interviewed around 30 women from all backgrounds. Some were religious, some not. One was a prostitute, another one was a doctor, and another a lesbian student. And I finally published those testimonies I collected in a book titled Sex et Mensonges, Sex and Lies. In Morocco, extramarital sexual intercourse is sanctioned and punishable by a prison term from 1 month to a year. The blame is essentially borne by women, as they are expected to be virgin on their wedding day. Adultery and homosexuality, as well as abortion, are punished by law, which means that if you want to strictly comply by the Moroccan law, you need to be heterosexual and married to have sex. In my book, I try to demonstrate that sexual rights are an integral part of human rights. There are no ancillary rights or just insignificant rights. To exercise your sexual citizenship, to make free use of your body, to entertain a free, riskless, and fulfilling sexual life are basic needs and rights which should be inalienable and guaranteed to all. Today, the current state in Morocco is no longer bearable because sexual misery is generalized, especially for women, whose basic sexual needs are simply denied except from reproduction. Such a state hampered the individual and citizen self-development, and I think that it's impossible to construct a democracy in a country where citizens cannot make free use of their body. So that's why I'm not so much obsessed by sex, but obsessed by sexual freedom. Thank you.
How about now? All right. So I will start with a question and then leave you to ask your own questions right after. My question has to do with the Perfect Nanny, which I greatly, I loved it. I mean, it was so much fun. Okay, fun may not be the proper term.
Someone told me it was fun, but why not?
Well, it was a good read. And critics have written about your book and said, have praised the way that you portray motherhood for working women as an experience that is guilt-ridden. Guilty at work for the time not spent with the kids, and then guilty at home for the time not spent on one's career. But there is another sort of guilt, it seems to me, in your novel, and maybe your current project about sexuality has also to do with guilt. But that second aspect of guilt has to do with class relations. Miriam and Paul, the protagonists, the fathers of the parents of the children, are Parisian middle class. They vacation in Greece, in Sifnos. I went there too, I could relate. Louise the nanny is, however, part of the invisible class, the class of the nanny, the domestics, the poor, a class that we call today les précaires. And so I was, and their relationship, the parents and the nanny's relationship is fraught with guilt as well. And I was wondering, what did you want to convey through that exploration of this relationship that is one of power, which the parents are trying to maybe equalize but can't? What is it that you were trying to express there?
You know, when I had my first child, I decided to hire a nanny. So I did like Miriam and Paul, I did interviews and I met many nannies. And I discovered a world that actually I didn't know at all. And I met with women who were 20 or even 30 years older than me. Women who were mothers, who had 2, 3, 4 children. And women who had much more experience than I have about life, about violence, because very often they came from countries in war countries and countries very poor. So it was very weird to me. I was 30 years old. I knew nothing about life. I was feeling like a baby. And I had in front of me women who were going to be my employee. I was going to pay this woman. I was going to be her boss and tell her what to do or not to do. Although I had the feeling that she knew much more about children and about life than I did. And I realized that it was very difficult for me to assume the fact of being the boss. That I was feeling very guilty and uncomfortable about this position. And I realized that I was not alone to feel this, because Paul and Miriam, they belong to what we call in France les bobos. It's the hipsters, if you want. They live in gentrified neighborhoods. They are nice people, very cool. They love environment, they eat quinoa, they ride bike. They're not racist, they are very open-minded, they are very nice to poor people, they give things. So I wanted to confront them to reality, because in theory we have very good ideas and very good intentions, and we are nice people. But when it comes to reality, when we meet poor people, and when we meet foreigners, when we meet immigrants, when we have to face this very hard reality, how do we really act? Maybe that we are more racist than we think. Maybe that we are more selfish than we think. So what interested me was this. She feels guilty because at the same time she doesn't want to be the boss, but she knows that she was raised and she belongs to a class that is going to make her the boss all her life, and that she is going to give order to a woman who is older than her. And so I think that's what I wanted to explore. And concerning motherhood, you said that she feels guilty because as a mother she discovers all the guilt that goes with motherhood. But I think that what I wanted to convey was also the fact that motherhood is a much more complex experience than what you think when you're going to be a mother, because everyone is telling you, you know, the day you're going to become a mother, it's going to be the most beautiful day of your life, and you will never feel alone again, and you will feel so fulfilled, and you will need nothing else. It's like those crazy women, excuse me, who tells me that the day they gave birth was the most beautiful day of their life. I can't understand after what I suffered, so bref. But when you become a mother, of course you have there are some wonderful things, but there are also very dark feelings. The first time I looked at my children, I felt love, but I felt also fear. I felt a lot of fear, of anxiety, and I was like, if something happened to them, what am I going to do? Maybe I will die, maybe I won't survive to this. And sometimes you are bored with your children. Sometimes you don't want to play with them. You just want to be alone in your room reading a book, and you don't care that he wants to play Lego and you don't like Lego. And sometimes you feel very lonely with your children. But you know, I reread a lot Simone de Beauvoir and Badinter. And women, we are raised with the idea that we are made to love and to give love and to be loved. For centuries, the idea for women was your destiny is to love and to be loved. And if you're not fulfilled by this. You feel guilty because you have the feeling that you're not doing what you are supposed to do, and you're not feeling what you are supposed to feel. So it's very difficult as a mother to feel lonely with your children, but sometimes you feel lonely with your children. You come home, you have a lot of problems, and you're thinking of a lot of things, and your children, they don't care about your adult problem, and of course they're right not to care, but you feel lonely because you can't share all these things with them. So I wanted to say that motherhood is not only about love and tenderness, it's also, there is also a dark side.
I'm going to open the questions from the floor. There are two microphones here. So if you raise your hand, there was one microphone. You could have this one. And if you raise your hand, a microphone would suddenly appear.
Bonjour, Leila. So this semester, I'm actually taking a class with Professor Haklan, and this week we've watched Ink à la Dimanche, which tells the story of an Algerian woman who moves to France during the 1980s because of the réunion familiale, and she suffers abuse from her husband and belle-mère. I was wondering, I mean, in your work, Sex et le mensonge, you talk about sexuality in Morocco, right? What's the situation like now in other Francophone countries in Africa regarding sexuality? Women? Thank you.
You know, the problem in Morocco is that, contrary to Western countries, the law and the authorities are not, the laws are, we can say, against women. Because as I said, you can't have sexual relationship except if you're married. So for many women, it's very difficult because they lose their virginity, but then they are considered as whores. And men don't want to marry them, even if they had sex with them, but then they don't want to marry them. So it's very difficult for them because they are marginalized, considered as pariah. And it's society, the Moroccan society is a gregarious society. The dependency to the group is very important because the group is considered as a sort of a shelter, a protection. And at the same time, someone who decides to transgress the rules of the group is going to be immediately very, very lonely and put completely aside. So that's very difficult. And we are not used also, I think that the authorities and the popular culture is not used to mixity in the public domain. The authorities don't defend it as something that is important and something that we should fight for. It is very difficult for a woman in some cities to walk, just to take a bus, just to go to work, because men feels the right to comment on what you're wearing and on your body, and sometimes to harass you, and sometimes even to be violent. So it's a very difficult situation. Also in Morocco, you have 600 abortions per day. Abortion is illegal, but 600 per day. It means that women, they have sexual relationships, but as they don't have sexual education, many women don't know really how do you make babies, so they get pregnant and they get abortion in very, very bad conditions. Many of them die because of those illegal abortions. So the situation is now very, very problematic.
Ça marche? To kind of piggyback on what you were saying about sexuality in Morocco, should I speak in French? No?
No,
In English is okay. So you mentioned that it is illegal to have sex outside of marriage, and they are punishable by law, right? And I wondered if you could trace that the law back, because I believe the conception would be that Islam is the reason why.
It's not a law that comes from the Quran.
Exactly.
It's a French law. Actually, it's a law that was put by the French administration during the colonization. And if you look at the Moroccan penal code, it's exactly copied from the Napoleon Code. So at that time, you must imagine that the French administration had a very sexual way at looking at what we call the indigenous. They said, you know, Moroccan men, they are hypersexual. They are going to rape our women. So we need to be very strict on all the laws about sexuality in Morocco. So those laws are not religious. But then in the 80s and the 90s, there were a manipulation by the religious who began to say, oh, yes, we need to keep those laws because actually we need women to be virgins, and we need to fight against homosexuality because homosexuality is a deprivation coming from the Western countries. And yes, of course, we are going to fight against abortion. Why should a woman get an abortion? Because women should only have sex with her husband, and if she gets pregnant, she should have the children. So there is a manipulation now by the religion, but the laws are not religious by essence.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, like, because it's such important.
Exactly.
thing to do.
No.
Thank you.
You're right. Don't be shy.
Hi, thank you for being here. I have a question about your position as ambassador of Francophonie. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you understand that role, and maybe also a little bit about how you understand la Francophonie. It seems recently in France, discourses about Francophonie have been shifting to think more about French in a sort of context of pluralité, as opposed to a sort of French dominant situation in relationships around the world. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Exactly. I think that was exactly the idea of the new president, Emmanuel Macron. When he asked me to work with him, he said, I want to change completely the way we define and the way we look at the Francophonie, because for a very long time, what is very paradoxical is that Francophonie was not invented by France. The idea of Francophonie was invented by Tunisian, Guinean, and by Habib Bourguiba, by Diori, and by Léopold Sédar Senghor, who was Senegalese. And at that time, when they decided to found this organization of Francophonie, France was completely against it. And General de Gaulle, he was very angry against them, saying, now they are going to use our language to do things behind our back. What is this thing? I don't like this idea. It's like what was Kateb Yassine was saying, I speak French to say to the French people that I'm not French. And that's exactly the idea of this post-colonial definition of Francophonie. But then, actually, France, that's true, France used this Francophonie to build new relationship with the post-colonial countries, relationship that sometimes were not so clear and very corrupted, if we want to be very honest. And I think that Emmanuel Macron, he wanted to completely change this. First of all, he wanted to change the idea that when you say Francophonie, you hear colonialism. Now, French is our language. As a Moroccan, I consider French my language. And I think that for Senegalese, for someone from Congo, for Haiti, French is now our language. We have wonderful poets, we have wonderful writers, we have wonderful singers who sing, write, and do poetry in French, and we don't have to justify ourselves, and we don't have to consider ourselves only as victims. Now it's our language, and we, in a certain way, we took power over it. And you know, we were speaking about Islamists and religious, and in Morocco and many countries, they are telling us, you know, you have one language, one culture, and one book. You don't speak French. No, you should just speak Arabic because this is your language. And if you speak French, it means you betray your culture. You're a traitor because you are influenced by Western countries. And I want to fight against this. That's why I decided to go with Emmanuel Macron with this new definition of Francophonie, because I think that staying in this idea that yes, we are post-colonial countries and we are victims, and if we want to learn English or Spanish or French, it means that we sold our soul to the Western countries. I think it's a very, very bad thing to do, because we give arguments to the most conservative part of our societies who don't want the youth to be open-minded and to want to learn about other cultures. So for me, now Francophonie must be something that defends diversity, and the fact that French language is not the language of only the language of France. It's the language of many countries. And actually, I don't even think that we can say that there is one French language. There are French languages, because you don't speak the same French in Haiti, in Ouagadougou, in Montreal, in Switzerland. So it's very important now to hear also the different sonority, sensuality of this language. So that's what we are trying to do now with the president.
Thank you. I was wondering, I don't know much about the Moroccan culture, at least the parts that you were referencing, and I was wondering, as your new position in the French government, do you see any solution or clear path to a solution that might solve some of the maybe cultural and social issues in these countries? And do you think that your new position has provided you a platform to make a real difference?
Thank you. You know, for me, there are two solutions to the problem. The first one is education, and the second one is courage, bravery, I don't know, yeah. The problem is that for many, many years, the elites in Morocco and the left wing, the one we call the progressists, they were saying, you know, we shouldn't go too far, we shouldn't go too fast, because it's a traditional society, and if we begin to defend sexual rights, and the society is going to feel very attacked, and it's not a good thing, so let's go very slow. But actually they didn't defend at all those rights, and I think those rights are absolutely essential, and we need to be brave and to defend what we think. Even if, you know, in Morocco I represent a minority, I don't represent the majority of Morocco, but I don't see why the Islamists, the conservative, they defend their idea and they don't care about me. So I defend my idea and I don't care about them. I don't know why I should shut up if they speak out loud. So I think that all the progressists, all the liberals, all the left, we should speak out. We should stop being ashamed and be ashamed by religion and be ashamed by all this. And I don't care about the fact that people are telling me, no, but you know, it's not our culture. Feminism is not my culture. Homosexuality, no, we don't have homosexual here. But I don't care about this, I care about universality. And I don't think that we are our culture. I think that our culture is what we make of it. If I want to change my culture, I can change it. And my parents, you know, they were always shocked when people was telling me, as a Moroccan woman, and I remember my father said, never hear those kind of things. It doesn't exist such a thing. There is not a Moroccan woman. You're going to become a woman, the woman you want to become. You're going to invent your life and your destiny. And I think that we should look at things like this and defend universal rights. Whatever your culture, your religion, your status, I think that each human can defend the right to security, liberty, freedom, equality. So that's what I'm defending. And of course, education. We have a big problem of education in Morocco. 40% of Moroccan women can't read and can't write. And so I think the more Moroccan women will go to school, and the more we will fight for sexual rights, for the right for abortion, etc., because they will know their rights. And now many Moroccan women don't even know they have rights.
Good evening. A question about Emmanuel Macron and his perception, and particularly, you know, in light of the fact that there is a notable age difference between him and his wife. In the French from public media have embraced it. They didn't see much of it. The English gossiped a little and left it alone. Americans don't know who Macron is. How do the Moroccans, those that you may or identify with, or maybe not at all, but from your hearing and experience, how do they see it? Do they make an issue out of it? And if so, might it affect it? How does it work out, basically?
About his relationship with his wife, you mean, and the difference of the
correct, yeah, and all the things that it possibly implies.
Oh, you know, I have to think about it, but I never heard a Moroccan actually telling me something wrong about it. I think that they think like, oh, okay, that's French people, they're crazy, you know, well, we know it. But I think that people love her very much because she's so free and she assumes so much the situation. She doesn't care about the gossips and about what people say. So I think that people respect that. They respect the fact that she's a strong woman and that she doesn't care. So I've never heard actually people in Morocco saying things, and it was very funny because the first time I went to Morocco with Emmanuel Macron. I'm half Moroccan, half French, and I was with Emmanuel Macron and the King of Morocco, so I was like, oh, okay. It was very weird. And Macron was telling to the king, do you know her? And the king was saying, and you, do you know her? I know her more than you. And it was very weird because the Brigitte Macron was older than the king. And, you know, I never heard, I didn't see anything different in the way he was looking at her. Or I think that people don't care because it's a real couple. When you see them together, you can really see that there is something absolutely obvious about the fact that they love each other, so we don't care. And I think that the gossips you heard, and we all heard about the fact that maybe he was a homosexual, were very misogynistic, because people assume that if a man loves a woman who is older, of course he's a homosexual, because who will love a woman who is old? Of course, that means he loves men. And I think that's very, very misogynist.
Hi again. We spoke earlier. So something that I've taken French for less than 2 years, but something that I've noticed from talking with my professors is that there's a problem in linguistically speaking French, that there's not really a vocabulary to discuss race. And I was wondering, as you're writing your book, if you had similar linguistic challenges talking about sexuality or finding ways to talk about race and sexuality and gender and violence if those words simply don't exist.
I will tell you a funny story. 2 days ago, my English translator, he sent me an email telling me, I just translated your first novel, Dans le Jardin de l'Ogre. Can you read it and tell me if it's okay for you? And I have to tell you that I had some problems translating the book because in English, in French, you can describe the genitals of people just by saying le sexe. And in English, it's impossible, you can't. So he called me, and for like an hour, he was like, okay, should I put penis or dick here? Should I put vagina? And it was very weird because I don't know him. He's older than me. I've never seen him. And for an hour, I was speaking about penis. No, okay, you can put penis here and dick here. I think it's okay, yeah. So it was very weird. So, of course, when you are a writer and people are translating you, you're discovering a lot of things about languages, because you discover some languages have many words to say a thing, and some and other don't. But you know, as a writer, you always fight with language, even if you have the vocabulary. You always fight because it's never enough. You always fight to find the precise word. So even for instance, in a language in which you can find a lot of vocabulary to express race, I think it's, even in this language, it's difficult to express race, because you have to find the exact vocabulary, the exact word to do it. I don't know if in France it's difficult to express race. I just think that we express it in a very different way. And myself, I never, for example, in my books, I do glancing references to identity. I'm not very interested in identity of my characters because, you know, many times people in France or even in Morocco are asking me, where are you from? Who are you? What are you? But you know, I don't know who I am. And I don't know what I am. I can tell you what I do. I can tell you what I believe. I can tell you what I fight for, but I can't tell you who I am. I am an existentialist. You know, I love de Beauvoir. She's my goddess. And I think that you are what you do. You are not something. I don't have an essence. And the fact that there is Moroccan or French on my passport, what does it tell about me? I think it tells very few. So I'm much more interested in what my characters do than in what they are. Because I think that the reader will know who they are looking at what they do.
Hi, so I want to go back to your book, The Perfect Nanny. So I was wondering that in the book you wrote about the parents were from the Bobo social class, right? So I was thinking about what about the other social classes? I know you wrote about that one because they're nice people and all that, but I just want to know if other social classes are they treat the nannies in a worse way or something like that. And then I have a second question, which is that I know I read an interview that you did, and it said that you are still hiring nannies. And in the book...
No, just one.
Right, nanny. Well, in the book, you expressed the idea that maybe even the Bobo social class people, they're nice people, but they think they're treating the nannies in a nice way, but the nannies still feel bad sometimes. So how do you develop the trust with nannies? And like, what are you trying to have people get out of the book? I think you're definitely not writing a book for nannies to think that, oh, we have the right to hurt children or something like that. It's definitely for, I think, something else. So I was just wondering, like, what are you trying to, get the readers to understand?
Nothing. I don't try to get the reader think something. You know, there is no message in literature. Literature is not a place for a writer to say something for the reader to think. I'm not telling you what you think, or there is no moral, there is no bad guy and good guy. Literature is not made for this. Literature is just here to tell you a story first and then to make you think. I think that what is important is that I give you the book and then the book is yours. It's for you to figure it out what you think about those characters. But, you know, I think that we should look at literature as not as a place of comfort, but as a place of uncomfort, where we ask questions to ourselves, where it's a place of ambiguity, where we have to not to answer questions, but to ask questions. So I'm not trying to say something to the reader. I'm just telling him a story, and then the reader will decide what he thinks about this character or not. And concerning the social classes, what was very important to me was to describe the fact that Louise, she belongs in a certain way to an invisible class. She belongs to the invisibles, and that's why in the book I describe a lot the parks, the playgrounds. You know, in Paris in the afternoon, especially the winter, when you go to the parks, you find the old people, the unemployed, you find the nannies and the babies, which means you find people who produce nothing, people who don't make money, people who are just here waiting for the day to end, and they will be there the day after and the day after. And so those invisible ones were very interesting to me. I wanted to cast a light on them. and to make the reader look at them. But really, I think it's very, very important to say that literature is not here to give a message. It's here to make us think.
Bonsoir. Thank you for your talk. I grew up in India and I'm from there. And when you talked about,
can you put the mic here because I don't hear you?
Oh, is it on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I grew up in India, and when you talked a lot about the sort of post-colonial legacy that the French left behind, it reminded me a lot of how I had experienced the British post-colonial legacy growing up, especially in terms of laws and how culturally that shaped how people understand sexuality, and also the sort of the legacy of language, because I mean, even the fact that I can speak English is because the British colonized my country, but politically today that's sort of used as a card by a lot of conservative groups against liberals and progressives, saying that, oh, all of these Western elites speaking English, like American-educated Western elites speaking English, are trying to move our country in a way that isn't how it should be, which makes it not just difficult, but also very dangerous for progressives and liberals to have a voice politically and organize politically.
I could kiss you now. Thank you so much.
But I was just wondering, in your experience in Morocco, whether that has parallels, whether it's difficult for people to organize, and how difficult it's made it, or how much that's contributed to the rise of like right-wing populism in Morocco, because that certainly had an effect in my country. So I just wanted to hear your experience.
Yeah, that's exactly the same. And you know, I went to India twice and I went to meet Indian feminists, and we work a lot with India actually to try to find solutions to fight against violence. Question also of misery, abortions, all those questions are very, very similar between the two countries, and I love working with those feminist groups in India. It's extraordinary. And I think what I find extremely paradoxical today and extremely sad is that sometimes you see progress is being ashamed of fighting for their ideas because they feel some complex actually of being influenced by Western countries, or by having read a lot of books, or by the fact that they are not poor, etc. And it leaves a lot of space to those populists who said, we are the people, we understand the tradition, we understand what India is or what Morocco is. So I think that we really, really need to fight against this culture of shame, of defending progress. And I think also that it's very important to make links between our countries. It's very important for me as a Moroccan to see what Indians do, and I think Indians to look at what Brazilians do, because the more we will work together and the more we will find solutions to those problems. But you're totally right. It's we are in a very difficult position.
Hi. So I was in Madagascar in 2016, and there was a Francophonie conference at the time I was there, and it was very, very controversial with many of the Malagasy. So I was wondering, with Macron's new image of Francophonie, what the goal is to get that out to a lot of the countries that participate, and also to address kind of the controversy that I think bringing Francophonie into a country, especially Madagascar, that's so poor, in many ways as a result of post-colonialism, how to bring that in a positive way to those countries.
First of all, I think, as I said, that we need to face it. We need not to close our eyes and to do as if it doesn't exist. So we have to assume all those problems, and we have to assume the bad image that Francophonie has. For many years, people was doing as if it didn't exist. So I think it's very important to speak about it. And it's also important for our partners to get more involved in it. Because for many years, people were criticizing France, but at the same time, France was the country who was giving the more money to this organization of Francophonie. It was the country who was at the head of the programs, of many programs. So I think that partners need to get more involved. Morocco, Senegal, those countries need to tell if they really want to be Francophone, or if they are a little bit shy about it and don't assume this Francophonie. It's very paradoxical because, for instance, in Morocco, all the authorities, the ministers, the governors, they all speak French. They all put their children in French schools because the Moroccan public schools are very bad. It's very hypocritical. And at the same time, they are going to say, no, speaking French, it's not good because, you know, you're betraying your country. So I want to put them in front of their own contradictions. And I think it's very important for them to now decide, do you really want to get involved, or do you want to play this double speech in a certain way?
Hi. So you just mentioned Simone de Beauvoir and existentialism's philosophy. I'm wondering, Simone de Beauvoir also won the Prix Goncourt with her novel Les Mains de Rhône, and I'm recently reading her work, The Ethics of Ambiguity and the Second Sex. And my question is, how has her work influenced your writing? And if there's a favorite book of hers, which one is it? Thank you.
You know, when I was a teenager, I discovered one day in a book a photograph of Simone de Beauvoir. And she was at the Café de Flore, and she was sitting and there was a table full of books. And I was living in Rabat, a very boring city with no cafes and no libraries and nothing. And I was looking at this picture. I was like, wow. And it was written in the page, it was written that Simone de Beauvoir, an intellectual, free woman, who said to her best friend, one day, I'm going to be a very famous author. And I was like, wow, she's so brave to say this and even to think this, that maybe she will become a very famous author. So I decided to go to the library in my school and to get a book of Simone de Beauvoir, and I discovered that she wrote a book called Le Deuxième Sexe, Second Sex. I was 16, and I was sure that it was an erotic book, and that I was going to learn a lot of things. So I went to the library, and I was red and very shy, and I said to the woman, I wanted the second sex, because I was sure it was so erotic. And when I began, I was so disappointed. I was like, what is this? But I continued to read, and I was right to continue to read because I think that this book changed my life. Because for so many years, you know, people around me and the culture in Morocco was telling me what a woman is. You know, a woman is like this, and a woman is fragile, and a woman is nice, and a woman is sweet, and you shouldn't do this because you're a woman. And I knew it was wrong, I knew it was unfair, but I couldn't express why. I didn't have the words and I didn't have the arguments. And then I read the book and I felt so empowered because now I could fight with someone who was going to tell me a woman is this. So it was very, very important for me to read this book because it gave me really the feeling that freedom is the possibility to invent yourself. When you have freedom, you open a very, very wide horizon of invention. You can invent your destiny, maybe the destiny of a nation. So it was a very, very important book for me.
I think we've about spent our time, but I want to say thank you for such candor and openness to us. And I wanted to say also that you embody what you speak about, and you are very brave. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.